in manufacturing, if something is manufacturing, to go and work at a manufacturing place like that, you don't need any money in your pocket. You just have willingness to work. You'll be totally broke, have lousy credit, not a problem. But when it comes to tenants are going to rent there, they have to be working someplace. They have to have credit. They're going to spend money there. They're not going to earn money there. So it's really dicey when you go into a place like Racine in an area like that and say we're going to put in 140 market rate.
Good morning. Welcome back to Talking Racine. Mr. George Myers.
Morning.
Mr. Jim Spodek.
Morning.
I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen. And we're here visiting you this morning from Fantasyland. Financial Fantasyland. Now, we've been talking about TIDs. And Racine is up to number 26 now, gentlemen.
Right.
George, would you, why don't you take it here and explain how a TID works? Because you got a pretty good handle on this thing.
Yeah.
And we're firmly of the belief that it's a way to increase taxes without increasing taxes. So try and make sense out of what I just said.
Yeah. The original idea of a TID was that you had a piece of land, nothing was happening on it. All right. So it had, let's say it's a couple $100 worth of value, but if someone can come in there and build something on it, then it would have some tax value. In other words, the government would get taxes out of it. Well, to encourage this, they said, all right, what we'll do is on this piece of land that's been vacant forever, and looks like nobody's going to do anything out with it, anything you build on there, we'll take the taxes and we'll put back into that property for a period of years. It could be 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And that way, it'll build, it'll grow, and then eventually when the TID ends, then it reduces everybody's taxes because that will now contribute to the tax base. Prior to that, it doesn't. And that sounded pretty good. But somewhere along the line, somebody decided to amend that a little bit. So if you have a piece of land, and this is the way they work in Racine now, that nothing's happening on it, but somebody, let's say, puts a $60 million structure on it. Well, the taxes on that, let's say it's $60 million. Let's say it's $40,000 a year, whatever it is. You just make a figure. We'd go back into the land, but the way they set it up now is that while it's still a TID, the rest of the community will pay that $40,000 also. So in other words, yes, the taxes that building pays stays within the TID, but to make up for that lost $40,000, the rest of the community will pay that $40,000. So all their taxes get a little increase to pay for that. And then somebody else also thought, well, other people besides the community are benefiting from it. So what also happens is out throughout the county will also get to add that to their tax base, and so the people throughout the whole county also give a slight increase in taxes. So that's the way.
Okay, I got one
so
question.
It's essentially it's double taxed is what happens.
Okay, so the TID keeps, say, 25 years, 30 years. That money in the TID stays within the TID.
Right.
Who controls that money in the TID then? That money that is in that TID.
That's a real good question, and it's if from our experience, one of the TIDs is the Johnson buildings, the ones on Main Street. Mm-hmm. And part of that TID is the park across the street, the square, they call it a square. That's part of the TID. So from time to time, you see things going on over on Monument Square that's not costing the taxpayers any money. Well, who's paying for it? Oh, it's in a TID. So essentially, Johnson's Wax pays the taxes on their building. It doesn't go into the general fund for the rest of us. It stays in the TID. So that is controlled by whoever controls the TID, and that it's the council or the mayor or whoever decides what we want to do, how we're going to do with it. It's not Johnson's Wax. They don't control it.
Right, they pay. They do pay.
They pay the money, and
Right.
but in the meantime, the rest of us throughout the community are paying for the taxes that Johnson isn't putting into the
Okay, so I'm going to give you one here. Roughly 40 years ago, they built the towers on Lake Avenue, which is that tall building with all the condominiums that overlooks the harbor and all the marina, and this is back 40 years ago. Just now, they relieved that TID 40 years later. It was, I think, a 25-year, and then they got a 15-year extension on it. So
Yeah.
for 40 years, the citizens of Racine were paying for that that TID. Now, after 40 years, they are going to retire that TID.
Now, what happens then? And by the way, in Racine, it's not as dramatic as what happened in Sturtevant, though. They had a big one. I think it might have been the Renaissance Theater thing. When that TID was finally retired, boy, the Sturtevant people all got it. It was a big tax decrease. It was 10-20%
Right.
reduction in their taxes because the TID was finally retired, so the taxes that were being paid by them went to the community rather than staying in the TID.
So that actually worked.
When you find,
Sort of.
that's right. If they were treated properly, they're a good idea.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the way they're used. It's that the community doesn't have to double tax. When they do it, it's called taxing to the max. In other words, a TID gets built up, and it's possible to for the community to do it. A real good example is a little village called Weyerhaeuser. Now, this is what can actually happen. And it actually did happen. Weyerhaeuser has a total value in the community of about $8 million. Well, they had to put a TID out there that its value went up to $17 million, which is more.
When you say value, what are you talking about? You're talking
The
about the value of the property?
of the property within that TID, which was double the whole value of the village. Well, because they were taxing to the max, the taxpayers of Weyerhaeuser had about a $4 per thousand tax, and because they also had to pay for the TID money that wasn't going to them, their tax rate went up to almost $11 per thousand. So it almost tripled because of the TID.
Their taxes
Their
almost tripled.
property taxes on their individual houses almost tripled because of the
Okay,
TID,
so if you're paying
because of the TID.
$4,000, next year you're paying $12,000.
If they're paying taxes,
Okay,
right?
all right. Let's
Well,
pick
it's
up.
actually only $11.55.
Okay, well, what am I
Yeah.
thinking?
Almost tripled.
What about Foxconn?
Oh, no.
I was going
Now,
to ask
there
that.
you go. Now, there's a community. See, Racine's base is about $3.3 billion. All right. So if someone were to come in with Foxconn, let's say, and they put $1 billion into it, our taxes could go up 30% if they tax to the max. Now, Mount Pleasant's tax, I don't believe, is close to ours. I think theirs is closer to $1 or $2 billion. So if they're down there and Toxon comes and puts in a structure that's close to their equal the value of that whole a village combined, they could find their taxes doubling.
You think there's any danger of that happening?
Oh, no. Groot, he would never do that.
They'll never get Foxconn built.
It's not like one of those you just keep massaging. Okay, so now with that, George, this is what we're kind of leading up to it, of 141 apartments on the old Porter land in 6th Street and I think Wisconsin Avenue, right down that block.
Right, yeah.
7-story building. They just we're going to do a TID 26, so there's 26 TIDs now. Now, we can talk a little bit about a 7-story building and market rent in it. It's saying, I mean, my thing is, if it's market rent, why are we doing a TID to basically benefit? It's kind of like corporate welfare to me. I understand the low income. I mean, there's maybe a benefit to that. I don't like the whole TID thing in the first place, but I don't see where market rents, is a TID. When somebody could just come in and I'm going to run market rents. I just don't understand it. It's a benefit to the community.
Well, that's going to be a big damn building. If they take up that whole block with
Yep.
the little portion that's where the Unitarian Church is, That is going to be a big damn building.
Yeah,
a couple
darn right
stories
it is,
short
yeah.
of what the
Do
Now,
you have an
courthouse is across
estimate on the
street.
cost of the cost of that? Is that must be what 100 million?
I don't think it was quite that. No, I think it was like half of that, 50
50 million?
Something
Cover
like
that whole block?
Well, that's what they're saying. I don't know. It's,
7
George,
stories?
It's
They must not be
exactly.
going to put any lumber in there.
Yeah. Well, that's the only other thing. With this way, this whole
Is
market
that going to be like
inflation.
that practice field that the,
Yeah.
that the Bears have?
Now,
with,
this is Capital.
full of air?
Was it Capital? Cardinal Capital.
Yeah.
They're legit. I mean, you go back and look at some of their projects, but if you go to their projects, they're all subsidized housing of some form or another, and HUD money involved. So what would make this? Why would they go out of their realm to do this? To make it market rent. I just don't see it. I don't
Well,
see it.
and it's not unusual for something that's designed to be market rate to end up being subsidized housing, right? I mean, historically, that's kind of like
and they're not saying it. Corey Mason's saying it's going to be market rent. Well, is Cardinal Capital saying it's going to be market rent? I mean, there's some ifs there. This, partnership. I always.
What did they pay for that land anyway? I think
don't
they
know.
wanted like $1.2 million or something.
Yeah, could be. But I mean, you're talking $50 million, $1.2 million for the land is probably well within reason.
For a city block, over $1 million. That's. Ooh.
Well, $1 million don't mean what it used to mean.
No, and I guess if you get it high enough, you'll have a view of the lake.
You'll have a view of the lake, yeah. I don't know. I just don't. If they do it, that's great. If it happens,
If they can fill up that block with apartments and stores, that would be marvelous.
Yeah.
The problem is with that is we see too many vacancies downtown, which this is part of it, part of the downtown. Who's going to come in there and open up stores there? Now, whether people are going to live there, that would be marvelous if they could fill that up with tenants, because that would be just that many more people that are very close to downtown, which would help the downtown stores.
Right.
Some. I mean, it could work out that way, and I'm sure that's what Corey Mason is saying is going to happen. But you've got tenants. Manufacturing. If something is manufacturing, to go and work at a manufacturing place like that, you don't need any money in your pocket. You just have willingness to work. You'll be totally broke, have lousy credit, not a problem. But when it comes to tenants are going to rent there, they have to be working someplace. They have to have credit. They're going to spend money there. They're not going to earn money there. So it's really dicey when you go into a place like Racine in an area like that and say we're going to put in 140 market rate. That means a one-bedroom apartment. I think they're going around $1,500 market rate.
And they're going to go for more, George. With the cost of materials now has just gone up, skyrocketed, and we're going to see how that affects it. Here, I want to bring up one point. Now, let's just say Capital or Cardinal Capital comes in. They're looking at this thing. What if? Now, I'm just going to throw something on the table. I've been kind of watching this, and we've talked about it too. Is this Zuckerberg money that's come into Racine, and now it's in Milwaukee. Now there's some emails that have been released in Milwaukee, and it's still pointing more to Racine. It constantly comes back to Racine. I mean, I listen to radio shows now where they're zeroing in on Racine. What if, let's just say it comes down and there's some chaos that comes out of Racine, and the Corey is no longer mayor, or there's some scuttlebutt within the city of Racine. How does a project like this look at the next administration? Is there a risk that this administration could be compromised and this development would have to look at that? I mean, if I'm sticking this kind of money into a development.
Well, when is the
I
next
got-
mayoral race? Is that next
It's a
year or
couple
the year
years.
after?
It's 21, 22, I think. I think it's a year or so from now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this wouldn't even be off the ground. Now, if it's all locked in and it's ready to go, there's ifs. The hotel, they bring that up, the hotel down on the old festival site, that's another one. They talk about, well, we're going to do this and this. Well, that doesn't seem like that's moving along real well either. But there are, things that could happen outside of this that could affect these projects.
Well,
Will it? I don't
if a
know.
new mayor would come in, it would be almost going back to ground zero to
Yeah.
see if the new mayor really wants to put the citizens of Racine, the taxpayers of Racine, at risk, because there is some money being put in by the taxpayers of Racine. It's a loan, and I think it's $5 million.
Yeah, they want to borrow $5 million to
They're gonna
lend to
right.
Cardinal
The
Capital.
city's going to borrow money because the city can borrow money at a lower interest rate than the company can. So, but if the project goes sour, the city's stuck with that $5 million bond issue,
Yeah.
and where they have to pay it off, and sometimes they go bad. I mean, look what Mount Pleasant's put into
Right.
Foxconn, and Foxconn, it's stumbling along if
It's
they don't
floundering,
come
yeah.
through. Yeah, now all of a sudden, the Mount Pleasant taxpayers have what are they? What was it? 700? How many millions of dollars?
$740 million.
$700 million. That
Their debt prior to was about 25 million. Now they got 740 million.
Yeah.
I mean,
Approximately 30 times as much.
I mean, I hate to laugh, but you remember back in July of 2017, we said, "Whoa, this doesn't look like a good idea."
Not the type of
Yeah.
thing government should traditionally they shouldn't go in. The only reason they're having to do that is because the regulations and the taxes in the community make it so difficult to run a business. So the city has to give incentives now to get them to come in there.
Well,
and do
George,
it.
you give incentives to to beautiful areas that should not have any incentives. These TIDs are now developed for incentives, and that's what I talk about. Is this corporate welfare in a way? Now, maybe in Racine,
Corporate socialism.
yeah, in a way, yeah. And I there's this but for. Would they build if it wasn't, but for if would they build?
But for this, they wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that could.
That's an
actually
important. That's a necessary part of
Right.
establishing a TID. There must be a but-for clause in there that says somebody says under oath or however it is that except but for this project, we don't do this project, nothing's going to get developed.
Right.
And I know some of them been lies.
Yeah.
It was going to go anyway, but they just a little further incentive, and so they said
Right.
so they put the but-for clause in there.
So anyway, well, if did any difference or not, but we do see that. And
I'll tell you one that was for sure, and that was your area, Doc. That was a TID.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah,
blighted.
that was a residential TID. This whole big north. But for this TID, nothing's going to get changed.
Yeah,
Nobody's
right.
going to paint their house. They're going to put an addition.
Right, nobody's
That's
gonna put a
bunch
porch
of
up.
baloney.
Yeah.
That was just a.
and that's a lie.
That was just a way to
I
get.
wonder how much money they've actually put into that neighborhood. I should check into that.
You have to find out and see what the
I was
values of the
going to get a call. I was promised to get a call when that money became available. I'm still waiting for the call.
Don't hold your
Because
breath.
I thought maybe, I'll put in new windows, maybe fix the driveway up, because it's pretty blighted right now.
Okay, here's what I want to bring up. Nearly a third of property tax revenue in Chicago is diverted into 143 TID districts in the city of Chicago. Now think about that.
That's amazing.
A third of the property taxes is diverted from the tax base.
Mm-hmm.
And those citizens of Chicago are paying to cover that. And that's why those taxes are so outrageous. And the fact is that services are cut. Now, the same thing happens here. California, they outed those TIDs because they realized we can't function as a city because we're giving all this away to developments, and then we're having our citizens cover that, and we can't afford to sweep the streets and pick up the garbage, and we're struggling.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's interesting because I've got a guy that owns a property right across the street from me. If you're out there, howdy. Because I was out the other day and he says, "Oh, hey, TV guy," And we had talked when he first bought this property across the street, and he came up from Illinois, and he said, "Boy," he says, "it was a mess down there, an absolute mess." He says, "But you know what? It's worse here."
poor guy.
It's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Hey, get
glad
some
he came
Kringles.
in and
Sure,
he's
give him a
invested.
Kringle. Give him a Kringle. You'll feel better.
Yeah,
But
Tim
that-
McGring will take him to the beach.
What that's saying is that a third of all the property in Chicago is double taxed.
Yeah, that's
That's
George.
What, that's what they're saying.
That's why they're crying
Well,
down there.
But the value is being double taxed, and that's what's important. Is the
Well, that's
value.
why you have municipalities now are looking at these TIDs saying, "Hey, you know what? We have too many, and our
Well-
taxes are our residents are paying more taxes and getting less services." Bottom line, and
Right.
TIDs can
And
do that.
Chicago's following Detroit's line, and Racine's to a degree. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing was worse, I don't think, than Detroit. Detroit went from over 3 million people down to how many hundreds of thousands? I mean, they lost a huge
yeah,
percentage
the city
of,
of Detroit, yeah.
of their population. Racine hasn't done that. We lost about 20%. But Chicago's been losing population too.
Yeah.
People just can't afford to stay there.
But I've heard stories coming out of Detroit that they are making gains
I
over
think
there.
they're coming
you know,
back.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think they're growing again.
There were some beautiful old buildings and structures down there that were basically abandoned.
That was the
Some of them were being taken-
jewel of the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah,
That was the ideal city, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a gorgeous place 50 years ago.
What about no bid contracts? Let's move on to that because apparently we got another no bid contract here in town, and this time it's going to Kimberly Kind, who is somebody, or Kimberly Kane, I'm sorry, who has been involved in projects before in the city of Racine, and this one here is related to the election and the get out the vote effort and so on and so forth.
This is the one now she's going to be involved in a campaign to get people in Racine vaccinated. But prior to that, she was involved. Now this is Kimberly or Kane Communications. If you go back far enough, she was involved in trying to get, or Dickert, Mayor Dickert was trying to move her into Car 25 back maybe 10 years ago. So she's been a player in Racine for quite a while.
Just before that, I think she ran for alderman.
I think she did, right? She ran for alderman.
Yeah,
So,
fourth district.
yeah, she's definitely got a
Second
communication
district.
company in Milwaukee. She apparently, and I just want to kind of read this, the city, in their memorandum, it said the city of Racine has contracted with Kane Communication Group and at least 2 other times in recent years. The first project being towards the onset of COVID-19, in which he created a Safe Racine campaign. Apparently how to, work around COVID. And Kane also contracted to support the November 2020 elections through the city's clerk's office. Kane had the goals of helping to increase voter turnout over the 2020 election, increasing the number of absentee ballots returned without mistakes, and supported the training of more than 20 poll workers to run a successful campaign, most of whom were the first-time poll workers. On accounts, they were very successful.
Well, that's a noble effort. When you first read it, you think, oh, that's a good idea. And then you realize most of whom were first-time poll workers. Why? I mean, we know of people who had worked in the polls before and applied to work in the election
and you have to remember, let's go back to this election. Yeah, there's poll workers. We were shortage of poll workers. Now we contract with Kimberly Kane, who's a big donor to the Democratic Party, and Corey Mason. It's
Don't you have an email about somebody in the clerk's office having a stack of applications? We have more applications.
The pile. We'll put your name on the pile. Yeah.
Put your name on the file. Yeah, come on in.
But anyway, I find it kind of funny that this is, and now she's in for this.
Well, it's just the fact that it's a no bid contract.
Right.
Is like, what?
Exactly.
What the heck?
I know. It's like, and it's it's Corey Mason, is for the communication from the mayor requesting to waive formal bidding.
No conflict of interest there. No buddy stuff. No pay to play. No,
It just
none
puts
of
a
that.
strange aroma in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
So
It might
anyway,
be perfectly legitimate, but
I tell you what,
when you have to say that, it might be.
exactly.
You think he's going to run into any opposition on the council with regard to this?
No, they don't even know it. They don't even read it. Hey, George, we read more than they read.
All the bobbleheads will be bobbling.
Opposition on the
bring it
council,
on.
we never allow more than 1 or 2 people in opposition, and we do our best to get rid of them. So,
Oh, mercy.
when are we going to have another election? These are exciting times when you have an election in a city. I mean,
It is. Well,
You know.
spring, I suppose spring is the next elections, huh?
it boosts the local economy with all the yard signs and advertising.
Okay, George, you're up.
Me?
United.
What am I up for?
Racine Unified School District.
Senior.
We need a report on the progress there.
I'll tell you what we want to do. It's time to do a little demonstrating, folks. I mean, this sucking money out of the taxpayers, $1 billion, and it's up to the Supreme Court. And we're finding out when the Supreme Court's in session because we want to let them know that we are interested in this, and we want them to look at this case. I think Doc said it the easiest. So I'll leave mine go. It's like you got 50 votes there. You subtract a yes vote from it, and you count it up again, and there's 51 yes votes. You get one more instead of one less.
And just to be clear, your effort at this point is not to overturn the vote, right? I mean, but you want to know, was it a valid vote? And the only way you can do that is by looking at the
You
ballots.
have to look at the ballot.
And they're not being allowed to look at the ballots.
Right.
And so that's what this whole thing moving forward to the Supreme Court is all about. Why aren't we allowed to look at the ballots? And you brought up a good point last week. What are you keeping them 22 months for if nobody can look at them?
That's the amazing thing. Yeah, you have to
You
keep
should have a
22 months,
ballot
but nobody
burning
can look at them. We're keeping them pure and pristine. We don't want any fooling around with these ballots. So
But-
nobody gets to look at them.
Given your
Then
position,
why are you keeping them? Why don't you just get rid of them? Nobody will fool around if you just get rid of them.
given your position, that it's like, okay, you won, you can have the money, but we want to know, was this a valid process? Given that that's your position, why the hell are they being so resistant? And because of all this resistance, now they're going to end up with a demonstration on their hands, probably.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, the stink isn't going to go away.
You know, the old
Until you
60s,
address
the old
the
60s
issue.
is coming back. Back to the
so?
60s. Well, the guys that are in their 60s do the 60s.
I never left. That's what my wife
But
says.
you know, the funny thing about it is, if you put together a protest at the Supreme Court and say, listen, we're asking you to look at this petition or this review, why not? You're talking. It's a very simple one, and they should be able to look at it. Well written, well documented, and it's all right there. And when the appeals court, and I can tell you what, when the appeals court said we're not going to look at it at all, that sent a message. As far as I'm concerned, they're saying, hey, if we look at this, we really will have to do something about it.
Well,
Yeah.
I was trying to allay their fears a little bit with explaining George's position, and well, not just yours, but the whole group that is objecting to how this went down. If the audience understands that you're not trying to overturn anything, even though maybe it should be overturned,
Yeah,
what is the resistance?
Yeah,
All you're looking for is clarity and openness, transparency, and honesty. But honesty is probably a bridge too far.
Well, I can't. I haven't talked to our lawyer recently, but if that's the case, yeah, they should definitely just look at it. That's the main thing I like to do is just look at it, even if it just continues on. But I think there's some people who feel that it was over on the recount. There was evidence that the election was actually lost by the referendum people. That they were 14 votes short instead of 5 votes over. So. And that may still be at issue, is the thing. It might be. I couldn't guarantee that.
Well, I was down there too. I saw the board, where they had the mathematics up there.
we asked
they
him,
had all of the.
yeah.
Yeah, we asked, why is this total here? That's not.
I said that was wrong, and he said, and he told us, he said, oh, those are just rough figures right now. We have to give something to the press because people want to know what's going on. So when they were done with the canvassing of the votes, I expected to see some changes on that board. Not a vote was changed. Actually, one vote was changed, but then they went back and corrected it, so I agreed totally with the board.
Hey, well.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, financial fantasy land. It's just all smoke and mirrors.
It's amazing. It's amazing what goes on with American elections today.
But you know what? Historically, I'm not sure we're just not right in sync with what's been going on since the very inception of the Republic. I question the integrity of a lot of elections in the past. But that's just me. Anyway, that's it for today. Come back and see us next week, would you please? It's been a real pleasure to have you here. Have a good week.